Changing needs fulfillment of human needs. So in this session, we'll go through the fundamental theories of human needs. So as we know, there are basically two theories when one talks about human needs, and they are conservation personalist theory and liberal situationist theory. So we'll see what each of them actually means. Conservation personalist theory depicts human beings as creation beings engaged in violent conflicts. Liberal situationist theories provide conflicts due to human behavior that normally get resolved with ground for optimism. So the fundamental difference is that in conservation personalist theory, human beings are depicted as creation beings engaged in violent conflicts. There is this concept of conflict which exists between human beings, and that is basically pronounced in conservation personalist theory. In liberal situationist theory, although there are conflicts, human behavior normally tries to resolve those conflicts with ground for optimism. That is what is pronounced more in liberal situationist theories. We'll explain a little bit more about this in a subsequent session, but first we'll see what are some of the definitions which are basically to do with basic human needs. So we'll first see what Paul Seitz has defined basic human needs. According to Paul Seitz, or another theorist, Paul Seitz, in whose control basis of social order called in for 8 essential needs whose satisfaction was required for non-deviant and non-violent individual behavior. So according to Paul Seitz, this included primary needs for response, stimulation, security, and recognition under expression RSSR, and derivative needs for justice, meaning rationality and control, under expression J. So this is what was according to Paul Seitz on basic human needs. Next, we'll see what is Maslow's conception. Maslow, another advocate of basic human needs. What, according to him, what exactly was basic human needs? So according to Maslow, the importance of Maslow's conception is that human development is a sequential satisfaction of basic needs, grouped under physiology, safety, love, esteem, and self-actualization cannot be forgotten. Psychological, he has not really actually been advocating the cause, but his advocating the causes of mostly physiological, safety, love, esteem, and self-actualization. Now, there is another person, John Burton. John Burton is a very famous advocate of basic human needs. So what he has told about basic human needs are, it offered a possible method of grounding fields of conflict analysis and resolution, resulting in a defensible theory of person. So together with writers Galton, Coate, and Rossetti, Burton provided new field of post-war social sciences, which is mechanistic, utilitarianism, behaviorism, cultural relativism, and Hobbesian realism. So these much elements were contained as per Burton's definition of human needs. In Burton's view, need for understanding destructive social conflicts are identity, recognition, security, and personal development. Since state systems did not recognize identity, it gave way to modern ethno-nationalistic struggles, as in the case of Palestinian-Israel conflicts. We'll define a little bit about the conflict in a later session. So what is human needs theory here? So human needs theory, according to Burton's view, has a relative object bias and gets across local, political, and cultural differences for understanding the source of conflict, and ends up in designing conflict resolution process and founding conflict analysis and resolution as an autonomous discipline. So conflict theorists recognize this, no matter whether they agree with Burton or not. So those are some of the definitions on basic human needs. Now we'll go and explain what is need for human needs theory. So here it's a lecture on conservative personalism versus liberal situationism. So even after 1970, there was persistence of irrational social struggles with its missing opportunities for their resolution. However, this was explained based on theories on conservative personalism and liberal situationalism. So conservative personalism also had an element of conflict versus uh, non-conflict resolution or conflict resolution. We'll define about that in a little while. But first, what is conservative personalism? It only aggravated situations that prompted human beings as creative beings driven to engage in violent conflicts. This we actually had seen. So in this context, sin, aggression, domination cannot be ruled out, where non-violent, self-enforcing conflict resolution was considered a utopian fantasy. It was considered that they will never achieve non-violent, self-enforcing conflict resolution. And conservative personalism always had a context for sin, aggression, and domination. Now, liberal situationism or situational theory provided conflict resolution, providing ground for optimism, which we have already seen. So this was considering, and also there was a black box as a metaphoric. We'll come to that in a little while. But first, this was considered by considering environment and making adjustments to environment surrounding the black box. So black box was considered a metaphoric, and environment was considered, making adjustment to environment surrounding the black box was considered when they analyzed liberal situational theory as well as conflict as well as conservative personal theory. So here the following, so also some theories were taken up as a backdrop, which were in the context of black box interactions and theories. Frustration typified aggression was one theory which was considered. Social learning theory was considered. Post-Freudian psychoanalytic theory was considered. We'll touch base with, in a very brief way, we'll go through each of them and see what is its importance in the context of black box interactions and theories. So here the following theories were studied based on a black box premises. Frustration typified aggression. This theory was by Pollard, showed aggressive instincts wherever there was a goal-oriented activity. So wherever there was a goal-oriented activity, aggressive instincts were present according to frustration typified aggression. In social learning theory, it considered humans as cognitive creatures whose ideas were shaped by social conditioning. So by social conditioning, human beings got ideas, they are cognitive creatures. And that is the basis of social learning theory. Post-Freudian psychoanalytic theory moved analogously away from primacy of families or cultural situations. So Freudian psychoanalytic theory moved away from cultural situations, families, primacy of families, etc. So that is a background on theories in the context of black box interactions. Now let us find out what are Burton's findings. So in all these black box interactions, Burton saw an underlying similarity where Burton found out that personalistic or social learning opened the door to limited social engineering by suggesting aggressive behaviors that can be environmentally controlled as controls wielded on a black box. Situational practitioners, psychoanalytic theory, found themselves unable or unwilling to reconstruct social environments, that is, moving away from families or cultural situations to the extent eliminating antisocial behaviors. However, all the three theories, when faced with a case of destructible violence, both the school of thoughts, personalism and situationalism, tended to respond as if objectionable behaviors could be modified by the right combination of threats and findings. So those were some of the findings of Burton. Also, conservative personalists, when took the side of deterrence, Liberal situationists went along with positive reinforcement or pleasure. That is, curves of pain and pleasure will produce consensual behavior. Force need only be used according to both the theorists as a last resort. It was also seen that both the theorists join hands on a political realism or realm and hence are realists. So that is what we are going to see next. What is realist and realism? So realist and realism was actually considered in the matter of foreign affairs and in the matter of domestic affairs. We'll see what each of them are. So in foreign affairs, realists emphasize relentless pursuit of power and power-based negotiations as the only alternative to intergroup violence. Morgan than 1985. So that is foreign affairs. Whereas in the matter of domestic affairs, they emphasized normative consensus and violent suppression of crimes, as per Cossier-Wilson, 1964-68. However, Burton notices that none of these methods used by realists did subscribe transnational and domestic social conflicts. Hence, according to Burton, realism hence was not realistic. It could not stop ethno-nationalistic war, civil wars, violent struggles, manipulative coercion, in a way, making coercion was the primary or the prime focus in all their actions. Burton then was of the opinion that basic human needs theory is the call of the hour that would challenge both branches of realism and would resolve the conflict by adopting the method of optimistic personalism in place of conservative personalism. So that those were Burton's views. Next, we'll take a look at what is basic human needs theory. So three virtues of basic human needs theory exist. One is conflict resolvers, needs-based map of the field, what causes a need-based approach, and destructive social conflict. So we'll go through each of them now very briefly. Okay. The first one deals with conflict resolvers and is asked to make a distinction of the numerous struggles that dealt with trinity of force, law, and power-based negotiations. So that is conflict resolvers. The second one is equipped with need-based map of the field. Conflict resolvers and analysts understand the contradictions in negotiations and dispute resolution. So it was encouraged to design the resolution process in such a way that it is around the conflict's underlying generic issues. So that is need-based map of the field. Now that last one is the third one is the what causes a need-based approach and destructive social conflict. So in the third one, it was understood that needs-based approach and destructive social conflicts were caused by a few manipulative leaders or is caused by the existence of cultural or ideological differences. Moreover, the theory linked conflict analysis and conflict resolution, as in the case of Huntington's clash of civilization theory. So that is basically basic human needs theory. Now let us see what are the limitations of needs theory. So objective bias for socially and politically salient needs in human biology or nature is essentialist, decontextualized, and historical. Now we'll see what are the major roles in needs fulfillment. So which is lack of satisfiers in equivalence theories of basic human needs and identity-based conflicts and Middle East conflicts. And before we go into that, in the limitations of needs theory, John Burton's counter arguments were there actually. Transcending difference in class and gender are culturally driven. Separation between needs and satisfiers in terms of concepts like identity and security does not independently exist but exists out of satisfiers. If satisfiers are culturally bound, so are needs. So these are basically John Burton's counter arguments. Now we'll go into major roles in needs fulfillment. So here, lack of satisfiers in equivalence theory of basic human needs, and then identity-based conflicts and Middle East conflicts. So here it is known that, and bring it to the notice, a lack of theories of satisfiers when in equivalence theories of basic human needs. This is by Mitchell. That means one does not have as many theories of satisfiers as there are theories of basic human needs. So in the case while exploring an identity-based conflict, the need for identity is everywhere, whereas what will satisfy the identity depends upon local history and changing circumstance. Having known this, the needs management is required to take decisions as to how these needs can be fulfilled, no matter where they exist or where there exists more satisfying needs or where there exists satisfiers. It is also imperative to take a first-hand look at the reasons or causes for a lack of theory of satisfiers and is hereby determined as follows. Lack of satisfiers or theory of satisfiers exists because of existence of a solution providing basic human needs and relativizing or marginalizing satisfiers. It also exists because in identity-based conflicts, need for identity is everywhere, but what satisfies it is present only if there is some local history behind it or there are changing circumstances that support it. So there is a idea behind identity and lack of identity based conflicts, or basically identity based conflicts because of lack of methods to prove an identity. So that gets into nationalism and a few more of those concepts. So it's also well known that it is practically impossible to predict terminators of identity based conflicts. The occasion may also be used to introspect with some clear objectives on identity-based conflict, as in the case of Middle East conflicts. In Middle East conflicts, there is a problem of identity and methods to prove an identity of a certain segregation. So that is where this needs fulfillment comes into picture. And identity-based conflicts or Middle East conflicts were based on natural identities in question that were conceived in religions and in secular means. Middle East conflicts also exemplifies fact that it is disregarding Burton's advocacy of conflict prevention. Needs theory is generally applied after violent social conflicts erupted or happened, and as a matter of fact, it becomes difficult for making analysis of needs and satisfiers. So in Middle East conflicts, segregation is right because in Middle East conflict it's an identity conflict and nationalism of groups of people are questioned in any context. So that is basically the major roles in needs fulfillment. And finally, needs theory development. So development of needs theory span across predictive study of minorities, distinctions drawn between individual and group needs, as well as the significance of its psychological origins. So Ted R. Gurr, his predictive study, Ted R. Gurr's predictive study of minorities in the case of minorities in the Middle East conflict shows that the minorities are at risk and shows needs theorists a possible way to enhance the usefulness of the theory. A regional or global survey on how security and identity needs are conceived is an absolute must, which will increase the level of satisfiers and satisfaction. So development of needs and satisfiers applicable to conflicts are not primarily ethno-nationalist in nature, but may form other means of group definitions. That is to say, the group definitions need not be ethno-nationalist, but groups in that place may be identified. So in order to know more about roles of basic needs in conflict, a better understanding of its psychological origins and processes are required through which one can learn that needs become conscious motivators of collective action. So the prognosis is the same. Needs become conscious motivators of collective action. Thank you.